So let's go back to Kanye West. So he announces that he's a billionaire a couple of days ago or a week ago. We're in the middle of a COVID crisis. There is millions of people who are out of work. I think it's something like 13 million in the US out of work, tons in the UK. We're all feeling slightly unnervous. So to announce your billionaireship, I'm invented that word, in the middle of that feels slightly disingenuous or badly timed.
I think Kanye that is not in beef with Jay-Z doesn't announce this right now. But because of his personal issues with Jay-Z and Jay-Z being a billionaire, I think it's all in competition with him.
The Dope Black Dad podcast. My name is Marvyn Harrison. This week, I'm joined with some incredible people. We have Tommy Williams, who is an author, who actually wrote the article about me in the Forbes. And I'll tell you now, Tommy, this is the first article where people from like other worlds were like reaching out to me. People were talking about me like I made the billion pound list or something. That's how much they were checking for me. So thank you very much for making me famous in corners of my Facebook that never made me famous before. And also on LinkedIn, I'm popping there. So thank you very much. We're also here with our regular contributor and Jesus himself, Darwood Grace. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. How are you today?
God bless you, my child.
Wow. Wow. Everything apart from even the God bless is questionable, bro. We need to discuss that.
I know Amani's in there, isn't it?
Wow.
Yeah, bro, you can't. Listen, you started a whole secondary podcast on your own.
This guy. Did you actually start it?
Yeah, it's already started, bro. This is in the podcast, bro. So, Amani, introduce yourself. How do you feel about being blasphemed on your first podcast with Dope Black?
It's a pleasure, man. It's an honor. Like, I think what you guys do for the community is exceptional. So to be part of that is, yeah. Thank you for having me, man. Thanks for the invite.
Thank you. Tommy, you're not in Dope Black, man, are you?
No, I haven't actually been to any of the events. It was only when we did the article that I realized that they had the alternative organization for men rather than just dads.
Yeah. All right, we'll get you in there. I'll go hook up. I know a guy that can hook it up. Anyway, thank you all for joining me this wonderful evening. So today's podcast is really interesting because about 3 days ago, Kanye West was announced, or recently Kanye West was announced as officially being a billionaire. So he's valued his Yeezy brand at 3.3 billion in total, which makes him, based on his share and his land ownings, his shares and his cash and liquidity, billionaire. So apparently he's worth 1.3 billion, which makes him the second black billionaire, but actually is worth more than Jay-Z by 200 million. So he's now the richest person in hip hop. And there is obviously a mixture because, you know, Kanye West is a polarizing figure. Many people will celebrate his art that's from a music point of view, but then also celebrate potentially some of the way he thinks and what he's created. But also people find it very, very difficult to align themselves with him under this new guise of being Republican, very pro-Trump, problematic in many ways in terms of views on women, etc., and many of his contradictions. But what I wanted to kind of unpack and get into is we have a system which celebrates billionaires. That's what it is. There is nothing alternative that's going to be at center stage at this point. You now have one that is black, and there's something about the concept of billionaires that people feel uncomfortable about. So I suppose my question is like, given that there are, 150 billionaires in the UK, for example, and there's 14 million people who are living in poverty in the UK, is it important and needed to have billionaires in your mind?
I think so.
Expand. What do you mean? Why?
I think so. I think it's like reaching that billionaire status is more of a personal achievement. I feel like that's kind of like the sum of all your hard work over all the years of kind of all those early mornings, all of those setbacks, to create something that basically is valued at £1 billion, or you sell something that's valued at a certain amount and that then gets given to you. I think that is that's a massive achievement, especially as an entrepreneur. You know, you don't start out to say, I just want to make £100. Like, you want to go to the top of this thing. So if that's like the level and the marker of success financially, then I would definitely say that, you know, it's a good thing. I think where it becomes a problem is where, you know, that becomes the kind of the divide between people. So you start to look at people differently. You start to see them, well, they stop kind of engaging with communities. They stop giving back. But then at the same time, who are we to kind of judge and say that, you know, people have to do anything? If that makes sense.
But how does that work then? So we're saying that we've created this atmosphere where 150 people are successful, they're billionaires, we celebrate them. But to the 14 million people who live in poverty, how do we reconcile that level of wealth being with such a small group of people?
But I mean, in terms of the people that are in poverty, is it the fault of the people that are billionaires that they're in poverty?
Potentially, they play a role in it. I suppose like the salaries is what, if you're talking about a salary-based individual who's still in poverty, so that means they earn full-time hours, but they only earn enough to just about survive, or they live under the poverty line, which I think the living wage is about £15 an hour. So if you're not paying living wage and then your company's worth billions, so let's take Sports Direct Mike Ashley, for example. He's a billionaire. He has many retail outlets who only pay probably working wage at best, so £9-10 an hour at best, most likely to be at the lower end. How do you reconcile him having $1 billion, having retail outlets that pay people so little, and those people subsequently being on the poverty line? That there seems to be a disconnect in the chain. It's not just about the success, is it?
Yeah, I would agree with that, I guess, in principle. But I guess what I would say is that he's a billionaire based on the number of shops he's got and the revenue that they make, right? And the value of his business, rather than kind of, I don't think it's just he's exploiting people. I think it's more the sheer volume of stores and kind of sales that he's doing, that's why he's rated at that.
Well,
right?
I think the point Marvyn might be trying to make, correct me if I'm wrong, is that it's because he's able to exploit people that he's a billionaire as well. And using Mike Ashley as an example.
So I don't know Mike Ashley, but I hear you. Yeah.
Yeah. He, the guy that owns Newcastle and that.
Okay.
Like he's a very pariah figure, and that, like, he's not well liked by Newcastle, and he's one of their own, and they just
I don't
like him
know much about him.
and whatnot. He's exploited and uses any loophole he can to get ahead. So he's just thinking. To be honest, what you said earlier about the achievement of a billionaire, and it shows, like, I fully understand that, but sometimes I think that a little bit gets missed, and it's about you know, some people just are really good at being sociable. So they have a social IQ. Some people have a sporting IQ or physical IQ. I think attracting money, or being financially able to attract money, is also like there's an IQ level to it as well. And some people are just better at it than others, and that they know how to go and find money, get money, make money off of anything, and when you're so well skilled in with that IQ, you reach the top, and that, like, I think it's the system that sets it up that we have to really look at, as opposed to the individuals. The capitalist society that we're a part of is what's created all these billionaires. So it's like trying to point a finger at a billionaire rather than the system doesn't make any sense.
When we say, sorry, Tom, just very quick. When we say the system is created by a group of individuals that it benefits. The system isn't a separate entity that is governed by somebody else. The system is the process that develops billionaires, and they keep that going. No billionaire is fighting against being a billionaire. They'll maintain the flow of revenue that keeps.
Yeah, because that's how they win. But you got to remember, it's like the systems put in place. The world economy kind of runs to it, and individuals profit off of that. and there's nothing. The system can't be eradicated. The only good thing about this corona thing that's happened is, with the world shutting down, we're starting to realize that this system isn't actually fit for purpose. That's probably the greatest thing out of this. Once this is all over and people are trying to put, like, countries are talking about coming back to work earlier because the economy is suffering and business is not running and whatnot, and they would rather risk people's health and livelihoods than, like, lose the amount of money they're losing, and that's a problem. And it's the system that's in place that allows this. But the truth is, the system's not actually fit for purpose. It doesn't serve humankind. We're killing the planet because of big business, and there's nothing that can be done. We're not healing ourselves because of big pharma and whatnot, like this. And it's not even conspiracy. It's just, if something is making money, why break it? If it's not broke, why fix it? And that's kind of what it seems like the system's designed to do.
Thanks, Darwood. So Tommy, where are you with it?
Yeah, so
the concept of being a billionaire.
First of all, I think it's a bit arbitrary, right? Because it's just one number, right? Where does it sit? 1 billion is 1,000 million pounds. Should it be 100 million? Should it be 10? Should it be 1 million? Where you sit on that is difficult, because some people would be higher and some people would be lower. But I agree with what Darwood was saying, in the sense that it's systemic, right? So, and what I mean by that is, so how do you actually get or amass that much wealth, right? 9 out of 10 times it's because you've built a monopoly business. And you could argue that that's not a good thing for the economy or society in general, because then if you're building the monopoly, you're able to exploit society. A good example of that is obviously Amazon, right? They basically have a monopoly over e-commerce. Another example, Mike Ashley is a good example in sports retail. So you could argue there's an inflection point where, as Mans was saying, you're building a fantastic business and it gets to a certain point. The question I would say is, at what point do you have too much power? Obviously, we're talking about wealth here, but there's a certain point where you have too much power and influence. And I actually think that's where the problems and the impact, the negative impact you could have on society, largely due to what you could call selfish motives, start to come into play. But I do think it's systemic. But then the flip side of that is, if it's systemic, then it's on the government to fix it, right? Because that's their job in society, in theory at least.
Okay, so if we take that as an idea, there are 607 billionaires in the US. 6 of them are black, according to Forbes. So there's Jay-Z, Michael Jordan, Oprah, Kanye West, David Stewart, who I think is I'm gonna try and remember. I just did this research, and Robert F. Smith. I think Robert F. Smith, they do telecoms, I want to say. So there's 6 in the US, and there's 1 in the UK. And even the one in the UK is technically a man from Sudan who just resided here long enough to become a UK national. Whether he bought it or not, I don't know.
So is Bill Cosby not a billionaire?
No, he never was. And even if he was, he probably wouldn't be now. Because the interesting thing about being a billionaire, a large part of that is based on perception. So valuations, unless you're talking about private holding, are usually based on perceptions of the success of the business. So when your perception and your PR is good, you then your business then is perceived to be worth more, and then you ultimately get a higher valuation. So if we have so little black billionaires, I think it's 1% in the US and 1% in the UK also. Is it important to have black billionaires? Should we celebrate the 6 we have, or the 7 we have in the UK and the US?
And reason being, and like I'm just tired of black people being excluded from being the best. And if we're in a system that none of us can change or dismantle, like, if you can't beat them, join them. Like, and the more black billionaires there are, the thing about billionaires, and I think just harking back to what Tommy was saying, is that they seem to always be philanthropic, because I think the behavior that comes with having wealth, where people can't say no to you and you can kind of start doing what you want, which is kind of super powerful, and living like to your own means, and like you're exacting your will upon the world, and that over time becomes learned behavior. So if you've got any little bit of screws loose in your mind, you will start doing stupid shit. And
So-
that's what a
so-
lot of billionaires seem to do.
And I'll,
So-
go on.
No, I was gonna say those 7 people we mentioned from the US and the UK are probably worth about a combined between 17 and 20 billion themselves. So
Yeah.
isn't that enough power to then make real powerful moves on behalf of black people? So does it
Yeah.
really equate as simplistically as you have billions, so you have power, and that can be used to benefit us? Or does it matter where your billions come from? Or where does it matter? Does race still play a role? Are they looked down upon by other billionaires as like those types of billionaires?
Probably. I'm sure they probably walk in, like, if their combined billion is like 20 billion, there's probably a billionaire in England that's like on his own. So when they walk in with their money, it's, oh, your little change is all right. Just put that on the counter. Have a drink. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, who knows what their egos are doing up in those upper echelons.
I guess what I was going to say before in relation to your question about celebrating black billionaires, I definitely would say that we should, because I go back to my original point in terms of celebrating that achievement coming from a lot of the places that they came from is almost the bottom of that ladder, and they've climbed their way up and they've done various different things in order to achieve that status. But I think one of the things that would bug me based on some of the people that are in our community that may then kind of get that status is whether or not they would, without trying to put too much pressure on them, because I also don't think that individuals should represent a whole race. But I personally feel like there's a lot of leading figures in our community that would get into that position and maybe not be the best role models, if that makes sense. You basically essentially amplify some of the things that they're already doing, which isn't necessarily conducive to our progress. So you'd see, for example, a rapper, I'm not going to mention anybody, but a rapper that might come through and have particular themes that are not necessarily conducive to young people growing up and having a particular positive mindset or positive behavior traits. They then are successful because of their career. They become a billionaire. They then flaunt that, and then maybe they don't necessarily represent, what we would hope someone, or how someone would represent themselves in that position. Because again, I would say that being in that position, you need to have a level of moral compass. Back to what you said, Darwood, about like that philanthropic kind of mentality, that idea of giving back, that idea of helping and empowering the community. I just don't know if some of the people that are maybe on track to get there have that same mentality without there being ulterior motive.
But that's why I think we need more, and that's why I do think we should just celebrate it and encourage even more black people to aim towards that, because I think the more of us that are up there doing that, the variety of personalities that will be up there, and maybe then they start coming together a little bit more. The same way a lot of other billionaires, they start working with each other. So what Rupert Murdoch is working with other billionaires, and they're controlling like whole countries and influencing elections, and this is not conspiracy. Rupert Murdoch owns a lot of media.
But from a black billionaire point of view, what are they paving for us? So if I just quickly go through the list very quickly and say Jay-Z gets critiqued constantly. His stuff with the NFL drew lots of negative criticism. Michael Jordan's probably the most memed billionaire I've ever met in my whole life. Oprah is currently getting backlash for the work she did, her and Gayle King, in regards to R. Kelly and Michael Jackson, and what she didn't do for other people accused of youth crimes. Kanye West, we all know, is probably the most controversial figure. People don't know who David Stewart and Robert F. Smith are by household name, or Mohammed Ibrahim. So it's like, if you make it through those visible means, then you're critiqued and shut down. And then if we just don't know who you are, you have a chance to breathe, but no one even bothers to find out who those other 3 men are and what they've actually done to accumulate this money. So it feels like, what power do they have to empower the black community as a whole? Or is it just that they're doing their own thing? Or should we even be asking them for anything?
I think expecting them to do it in the first place is somewhat controversial. I think a good point was made earlier where it said, so I think it was Mom said that you can't expect them to represent an entire race. They're not politicians. They haven't signed up for that. They're not activists. I do think, just from a purely sort of empathetic human standpoint, you think that they should want to give back, but it's not a responsibility, which is the way that I would put it. I do think there is an argument as we get more, there'll be more diversity amongst the types of people who do get to that level. But one thing I do think is good, and is the main reason I think we should celebrate them, is if you look at the way they've all got there, it's through ownership. Whether it's Jay-Z, whether it's Kanye, whether it's Diddy, well, I don't know if Diddy's a billionaire, but through all of them, it's been through ownership. And in our community, there's this mentality that it's partly from our parents because they just wanted security for us, that we should get stable jobs like doctors and lawyers. But the way you get to the positions like some of these guys are at, or girls, in Oprah's case, is through ownership. So celebrating them and being inspired by them and wanting to own and set up businesses is only going to help the community. And then that will obviously encourage us to then go out and start hiring people in the community and building wealth within the community rather than expecting handouts.
What's really interesting though is that this is never applied to billionaires who are white. They never get that level of scrutiny or that demand on them that they need to do.
So many of
anything.
them, and you got to remember they're not from a race that feels maligned or has suffered from like the racist overtures of how many years, and that. So it's almost like they kind of get a blight and they can just do Elon Musk and make electric cars and shit, or just own islands and then ask for a bailout for their airlines. They can just do bad shit and whatnot. Like we hold our own people up to so much scrutiny. And that, because I think the truth is we're so glad when someone makes it that we almost put them on a Jesus pedestal, and it's unfair on them. Like I don't like to critique some of these people, and if you look at the other differences, if you look at most of those black people, are there any of them that are not self-made? Like they all I think are self-made, whereas there are a lot of billionaires that have been handed stuff. Like Donald Trump, for his first business, his dad gave him $1 million. That was back in the day. So you can only imagine how much that it would be worth now and whatnot. But a lot of billionaires have become billionaires through nepotism. Like it's very rare that there's self-made billionaires in other worlds. So in the white world.
So do you think there's just an element of whiteness attached to the success of being a billionaire? And it's like, so how does that work for us? That means we're basically by default putting ourselves into somebody else's space, trying to be credible in that space when it's their measurement, it's their construct. And then does that mean that, like, is there a way to be successful outside of that? Could I be a billionaire
if Africa ruled the world, or if Africa just actually for once just practice financial xenophobia and just got one currency, there'd be a lot more billionaires in the thing, because the pendulum would swing. So I think, like, because of the amount of resources Africa actually has, and it'll be a way of protecting itself. Like you look at Twitter and whatnot, owned by a white guy and whatnot, but nothing gets driven on Twitter more than black Twitter driving it, which is another thing. So what Tommy and Amani were saying about ownership before, like it's another thing. And I think as black people, we have to get our mentality into that line of thinking. And until we do that, we will always be at the bottom of the pole. White, I don't think we're invading white spaces, but the system is a Western concept and whatnot. But yet you've got how many Arabian billionaires? Like you've got a lot. So it's not that we're stepping into
Indian
and Indian and Chinese and whatnot. There's a lot of billionaires from other places where they're not in this small minority and that.
And I would add to that. Go on, so bro.
No, go on.
I was going to say, and I'd also add to that, and I think, once you get to that stage of I've elevated my mind from one place of, wherever you are, and as you said, you've owned something and you built it to a particular level. Like, if you go into those rooms and you say, do you know what, I'm not even here to be accepted. I'm just here because I've made it, and I'm trying to show the guys coming after me that it's possible. I think that's the mindset that a lot of people that are on the come up will need to adopt, because again, you can go into the rooms and you probably still won't be accepted. We spoke about it before. People have got these billions and billions and billions, and you come in with 1 billion, they're like, oh, is that it? So I think if that's the mindset that you're going in, like I need to get into that club, then that's just not the right way to do it.
But I suppose like you want to get in that club for what?
That's what I'm saying. Like I don't. That's why I think that's why when I say some of the people that might be on track to be there based on entertainment or whatever, they may not necessarily be the best people to be like kind of we are billionaires for the next generation, because they might not necessarily understand like the quote unquote responsibility that comes with being in that position. Like as you said, we shouldn't necessarily kind of put this this spotlight on these 6 billionaires in America, but we will do. We'll look at them and we'll say, well, that's the richest person. Why aren't they doing this? Why aren't they doing that? They should save the day for us as black people. But I just personally feel like those that are kind of on the come up now, that are in the next 10 years that are going to most likely be billionaires, maybe their mentality isn't, like, I wouldn't put my responsibilities or my hopes on them. I'd say, okay, great, you did it, well done, but we need more that have that more kind of
where do you think that's going to come from, and how do you think you create a conveyor belt of people? Bearing in mind, being a billionaire is a very small minority of the global population that are going to do it. And appreciate we're not just talking about, it's not just about billionaires, but if you're in, once you pass 100 million, you're looking at a billion. That's the number that your mind is probably attained to. But what would you say the steps are? Where could that come from? Is it going to come from music, entertainment? Is it going to come from tech? Where would you say those places are going to come from? How do you develop them?
I would say tech, definitely. I'd say that, there's going to be there probably are already some amazing ideas that are in the works that are going to, really transform the way that we communicate and we engage over the next 10, 20 years, definitely. I would say entertainment, whether or not that happens at a particular scale in the UK, I don't know the numbers in terms of who's like really smashing it over here, and if they're even close to a billion, like in any kind of demographic. But I would definitely say that regardless of where it comes from, I think it's that the individual person that becomes a billionaire is going to have to have gone through like almost like, for want of a better term, almost like a rites of passage. Like, because to get to that position of I am a billionaire or I've got 100 million or whatever the case may be, I've got a particular level of wealth, I personally believe that comes with its own like underlying responsibilities, whether or not you like it or not. Like, there's going to be a lot.
I don't know. I think that's an unfair expectation to put on people.
That's what I'm saying. Whether you like it or not, I'm not saying that it's something that is a given. Like that's, you've got that responsibility. What I'm saying is that the same way that we will critique someone for doing, whatever, like as you were speaking before about tweets and stuff, like people will critique the smallest things. Someone to make it out, like say for example, argument say Stormzy becomes someone that's on 100 million, for example. That's going to be something that we would then start talking about.
It's close.
I wouldn't be surprised, to be fair. But as soon as that becomes something that it becomes headline, he gets an additional spotlight on him, I believe.
Yeah.
And
so I actually think that's unfair.
You think so?
Like I think it's unfair. Like it's.
But do you think there's
one man's shoulders will never be broad enough to carry the hopes of a whole race?
I completely agree with you, bro. But I don't know if how are we going to get that message to the whole community? Because
no, I know it's unfair. I'm not saying that the community won't do it, but it's unfair. And sometimes when I see these people acting out, I always feel like there's a little bit in it where they've just gone fuck it. Like I believe that's sometimes a part of it. They're like, fuck them, fuck how they're thinking. Like I think Kanye has fully said fuck it. Like
I think they all have. All the people we've listed. I think Michael Jordan was very clear about his distaste for hip hop community and the black working class, low income part of the US. He said,
they're the ones buying his trainers and keeping him hot.
Kanye West has made his statements clear. I wouldn't say Oprah's made any large statements, but there's definitely inconsistencies in questioning her. I think there's a piece of you that has to say fuck it. I think Jay-Z was like, that's a loser's mentality to sit there and monitor my pocket, what I'm doing, make these massive calculations based on, I'm working with NFL, so I must be a part of the Illuminati, and because you wore this thing and a thing, that means you're definitely working with Trump, and just like coming up with all these wild like hypotheses. Just like that happens to everybody. So basically what the psychosis is, you go in, you create a career for yourself, you start making money, you get to the level where you're like a Kendrick or a Drake, then you start making bigger ownership decisions and plays because you have enough about you that people want to do that business with you. And then you do that, and immediately people see you on that pedestal and they want to tear you down. They start coming for you, your ideas, your experience, your art, whatever it is. And so they have to make a detachment.
Yeah. Do you think it's self-hate on the rest of our parts? Because no other race is doing this to their own. Like it feels like this is stemming from insecurity, self-hate.
I won't say. I think every race does it to each other. Everyone gets shit. We just don't hear it or don't care.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure if you go to an Indian billionaire, the Indian community that are working in that person's like whatever it is isn't loving that guy right now. And I think everybody just is around for a bit too long where people start to lose that affinity. Tommy, what's your thoughts?
What's the expectation here? Because for me, it's like, is the expectation for Jay-Z to start giving grants to people directly?
All of his money, all of it. You shouldn't be a billionaire. You should give 900 million of it away.
So for me, it's like, I look at them as not role models. That's too strong a word, but as an inspiration, right, of what you can achieve through hard work and perseverance and ownership and all of that stuff. And for me, that's one of the reasons why, as much as I would prefer some diversity in the people that you named, a bit more diversity and not so much of a lean towards musicians and celebrities and stuff like that. But I do think those people also have a lot of power to speak to the entire culture at once. There's a reason no one knows who Robert Smith is, right? Because he's a private equity guy who, why would I know who he is other than if I went and did research? Whereas someone like I think Diddy doesn't do a bad job, and I know he's not someone you mentioned, but he does a few bits here and there, and he's able to speak to the entire culture at once. And I think sometimes we underestimate the power of pop culture and the power that those people can have to. I mean, Stormzy's a fantastic example in the UK, right? With the whole Penguin sponsorship, speaking about people getting educated. A banker who was as rich as Stormzy wouldn't be able to do that. People wouldn't listen to him, wouldn't care, unless you're someone who happens to work in that field. So for me, the expectation would be that they use their platform to tell people what are some of the good and bad things that they should be doing, so that you could hopefully avoid some mistakes they may have made and also get some of the wins that they've got as well. But the expectation that we should expect them to give us money, like, where does that stop then? If you're a millionaire, you should start handing out money as well.
This idea of handing out money freaks me out, though. I just don't get it. Like, even in the COVID crisis, people aren't handing out money. They're like giving a portion of what they can feel comfortable giving away. But this idea of just handing out, I'm worth $1 billion. Let's make that clear. No one, not. I don't think there's anybody who has a liquid billion chilling somewhere. So you're worth $1 billion through your assets, and then you expect me to give away 900 million in value to people who don't have the financial literacy to manage it, or into services that are hugely bloated in terms of middle management or mismanagement of funds, and then they waste it on like hiring bad services and bad people. Like, what is the actual process for this redistribution? Because the reason why the government is the government is because they don't understand money in the same way. That's why there's a House of Lords with experts in it who advise them on what they're meant to do, because they cannot manage a large sum of money like that properly. It's always mismanaged. Every budget has been mismanaged from the beginning of time. So I'm with you in terms of, like, I don't get the confusion as to why, but I do think there's a potential for a lack of financial literacy within our community to understand how being a billionaire, what that actually means and how it works and where the actual money is and how much they actually have from that billion themselves.
And I pick up on what you said before, and you're talking about, the role modeling and the idea of someone kind of, or the inspiration, should we say, someone getting to that stage and kind of being that beacon of hope for a generation of people, a certain demographic of people. And that's why I go back to the point I made before about that kind of rites of passage, because I personally believe, like I say rites of passage, but you get the point I'm making. It's that whole idea of, if you get to that particular level, what is the information you're passing back to those coming after you?
Yeah.
What is it that you're saying? So, for example, the people that we've mentioned in America, to a certain extent, they have that level of inspiration, I would say, whether that be the interviews or the gems that we can go on YouTube now and find gems on gems on gems based on things that they've experienced and how they pass it back. Whether or not they actively go out and say, I've created a platform to do this, other than Oprah. I think Oprah's the only one out of all of them. Yeah, Oprah's the only one, yeah. But the point I'm making is something like that, where you can say, do you know what, there's actually like a systemic approach to trying to change the outcomes for those coming after me, not just because I'm a billionaire, but because I've got a particular level of success, and I think that this is important and imperative for the continuation of those coming after me to even pass where I am, basically.
Yeah. So can I just ask then? So is there something specific about Black businesses? I think about AfroNation, and I think about their last maybe 12 to 15 months, where they've announced a series of very successful tour shows, festivals, where the hearts of Black people up and down the country. Also, some wild things that went on, but we won't go into that. They haven't announced their refunds yet for their AfroNation, which I think is in June, I want to say. But they've received, they were the founder, or the main founder and promoter, Smade, was trending online for like 2.5 days before his response, which was definitely unprofessional. But neither has Wireless or Creamfields given their refunds yet. But there isn't this same level of uproar. There's no one like Googling who's the CEO of Live Nation and where's my money.
Yeah, I was just about to say that.
So what is it then? Is it because Smade was disrespectful and said, "Go fuck yourselves" or some shit like that? Or how is that what
it's tied into that, but also there's this other thing that I just, and that, like, you don't know who the head of Wireless is, and is it Creamfields you mentioned? You don't know who the head is. Then there's something about us Black people, when we're successful, we like to brag about it. Like, I remember when I was growing up, there was this old adage that as soon as a Black person gets rich, you'll know through his shoes. As soon as a white person gets rich, you just won't know. And that, like, and it's one of those things where we like to stunt and show off and lay claim to being famous and blah blah, all this good stuff, to just be in the spotlight and whatnot. And that, when I saw he was trending, I was like, why does everybody know who you are? Like, you're probably using this for leverage and you're maneuvering, where if you'd have done this in the shadows, you would have been fine.
Okay, just very quickly.
And isn't AfroNation owned by Live Nation?
It's majority owned. So if Live Nation had done this event without the front of a Black person on it, do you think people would have cared about it in the same way?
Yeah,
no,
I think so. I think they're going because of the experience, knowing the people that are going to be there. Like, I think Smade, from my understanding of what I've seen, is without disrespecting him, he's a personality. He's someone that has got a story. He's someone that is able to front the brand and is able to kind of bring people around it. And he's doing his thing. But I mean, I didn't see his tweet, so I can't. I've just heard it today. That's wild.
Yeah, but could he just be the scapegoat?
Maybe, but I guess for me, like, I'm even thinking in my mind, like, I saw that Wireless moved their date to later on in the year, right?
I haven't seen that. Okay, cool.
Yeah, they moved their date to later on in the year, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, because I was speaking to someone else the other day that was trying to do an event around the same kind of time. And I think that they are trying to move it to later on in the year once they hear what's going on with lockdown and stuff. So I say that on the basis that he could be doing the same thing, hence why he hasn't mentioned anything about refunds. I don't know. I'm just saying.
But then if this is where the lack of professionalism comes in, because his official tweet was "chat shit, get blocked." Okay, and now we understand that as a colloquialism between us. And if I was talking about, a picture I put out and you hated it, then cool. But we're talking about something that people are spending hundreds of pounds to attend. Like, why would you use that type of communication? And then it only adds to what already we know is a difficult environment for Black business owners. So obviously the Wireless would never tweet that shit. So, is it more him, or is it just a universal thing?
It's unprofessional. No, that's
unprofessional.
Unprofessional.
And I think it's probably also the systems that he's got around him. Like, he shouldn't, like, his systems should have been in place to say, you cannot tweet. Like, whoever his team is should have said, you don't reply to this. Like, we've got a generic message just going out through Live Nation. It's like, this is the way to handle it. So somewhere along the line,
was an emotional response.
That's an emotional response, 100%. That's incorrect.
Yeah.
I actually did an article on Smade, a feature actually. I spoke to him about 15 months ago. So just after AfroNation last year, less than 15 months ago, so like 9 months ago. And it was obviously a huge success, which is one of the reasons I wanted to do a feature, like who's the guy behind all of this? Obviously found out it was him in coordination with Live Nation as well. So initially when I saw it trending on Twitter, I thought it's another case of us dragging someone from the culture who's had a little bit of success. But when I saw the tweets, I mean, you can't do that stuff. Like, it's just not what you do, particularly when you're already in the wrong, right? It's someone who's in the wrong and then you're doubling down and getting aggressive to defend yourself. That's probably the worst way you can go about it, particularly on a platform like Twitter, where all of the people who are coming for you don't actually need to see you face to face, right?
Yeah.
So for me, I think it was not professionally managed.
What did you make of him throughout the interview process? Was it on the phone? Is it email? Did you get more texture as to who he is and what he's about? And
his journey is inspirational, man. Like, the guy came from Nigeria, started club promoting at university, got a club night in London, started networking with Wizkid and all those guys before they were global superstars. So when they started to come to do shows in London later on, he was the person that they'd go to do their shows. First of all, the small shows in clubs like in South London and stuff, up until they started doing shows at the O2, which he co-organized. And then Live Nation came to him, and then they worked together to put AfroNation together. And that's why, for me, it was a bit of a shame how things have kind of turned on its head. Because in all honesty, what's probably happening here, I don't know the scenario, I don't work for them, but my assumption is that they do have insurance, because I don't think Live Nation is that big without insurance. Yeah. But the insurance probably requires the Portuguese government to say that we're not having festivals in the middle of July. Portugal haven't actually had as bad a coronavirus pandemic. So there may actually be a scenario where Portugal hasn't announced anything. So he hasn't got the insurance money back to give to people. And if you do basic maths of 10,000 people, I don't know, £50 a ticket, that's minimum 500K. And I think the numbers are bigger than that. So it's not something that they can obviously go and fetch out of a bank account. So he's probably waiting on an insurance payment. But having said all of that, you don't say chat shit get blocked as a public figure representing a business of any size.
Yeah. What's really interesting though is just hearing your breakdown. Like, that's something that most people wouldn't have any insight on. When they've received the ticket money, they've used that to offset against other things. So they've now booking, staging, production, staff, and they're starting to pay for things based on the numbers that they're seeing. And so now that they've put that money out, the whole thing needs to be insured to unwind itself, basically, to release funds. So potentially something like that is happening. With that information, partially people don't know, but also, do they care? I don't care about your insurance payment. I earn 26,000 a year or 30 a year. I've given you my money. I want it back now because I don't think this is going to go ahead. Can you give me a formal announcement? So does the texture actually matter when we're talking about billionaires and their stories and how much money they have? And does that information matter to the everyday public because they don't see themselves ever being there?
I think this is where communication is important. Had they come out with a statement, I don't know, 3 weeks after coronavirus started, saying, guys, everything's a bit up in the air at the moment, given what's going on. We're working hard internally to try and make the festival go ahead. There's obviously a chance it might not go ahead. If it doesn't go ahead, we'll let you guys know regarding refunds and etc. You want to get ahead of the news, right? Yeah. They ended up getting people messaging them saying, what's going on?
Yeah. So they were reactive instead of...
instead of proactive. And that's what I was going to say before is, like, knowing how, from my perspective, seeing how people react to the smallest of things. Imagine the messages and the bombardment he's getting every day. So I can understand an emotional response to say, I'm going to block you if you're chatting. Like, you get what I'm saying? But again, I go back to the point that we've all agreed, like, it's unprofessional. He should never have been. It's like at a club, if something's going wrong, the promoter's never at the door trying to, like, you send someone else to handle that because it's just too toxic out there. That's nothing to do with you. You know, you get someone else at the front line to handle that level of communication.
Mons definitely came to Sunday show, didn't you, bro?
I only came once, you know. But I just, it's you know, you can't be on the front like, I'm out in the queue, come and let me in. Like, no, I've got someone at the door. You wait in the queue until you come in. I can't do that. Do you get what I'm saying? Like that, all of that type of logistics and communications, as you said, I personally believe it just wasn't in place. And they really should have put out a message before, by the sounds of it.
So just going back to communication. So let's go back to Kanye West. So he announces that he's a billionaire a couple of days ago or a week ago. We're in the middle of a COVID crisis. There is millions of people who are out of work. I think it's something like 13 million in the US out of work, tons in the UK. We're all feeling slightly unnervous. So to announce your billionaireship, I'm invented that word, in the middle of that feels slightly disingenuous or badly timed.
I think Kanye that is not in beef with Jay-Z doesn't announce this right now. But because of his personal issues with Jay-Z and Jay-Z being a billionaire, I think it's all in competition with him. And I think it's almost a jab at like, I got here and you didn't help me get to this part. Like I got here on my own. Like when you kicked me when I was down and I'm here. Like every time Kanye does certain moves, I'm just like, oh, this is just because of your internal conflicts over being hurt by Jay-Z. That's what I felt.
I hear what you're saying. I don't know if I agree with that though, but I hear what you're saying.
I know it's an assumption.
Yeah, no, I hear
you know what? To be honest, like we're on the outside looking in.
Yeah.
And we can only guess why he announced it right now. But certain moves that he does, Kanye feels like one of them guys that just reacts off emotion and how he's feeling about a certain thing, and it informs the next move as opposed to being super calculated. Like Jay-Z's calculated. Like I know, and the one misstep Jay-Z did do was he gathered all these artists together and announced Tidal, but made it look like they were going to do some We Are the World shit. And in my head, I was like, he was never going to do some We Are the World shit. He was going to try and make money from whatever. That's his MO. And people were up in arms. So like, and to be honest, I think there's a part of Kanye that kind of likes the fame aspect and being this controversial. Like sometimes it's uncomfortable for him, but he will still like fight through it to say what he's saying and have it make the most amount of noise.
I hear that.
And you can disagree. It's just me guessing on the outside.
I guess
that's what I felt when he announced it.
I guess for me, like reading the article, the Forbes article, which I felt was a little bit distasteful in terms of how they presented it. It wasn't nice. But
can you give any details to what it was? Because that's something I observed as well. Is there anything that really stood out to you that felt like
it felt quite condescending. It felt like very much like, like this guy who's, like.
But he informed them that he was a billionaire.
Yeah, but if I remember correctly from reading the article, it was that there was an article that they did last year, and then he went back and said, actually, guys, here's the receipts. Like now I can actually show you where I'm at. So back to what you were saying in terms of the timing, maybe it wasn't timing.
Do you think Kanye, when he went back, and this is assumption, but do you think it was a calm, collected call, like here's the receipts, I just wanted to show you? Do you think it was done in that or do you think it was you don't have the ounce of swing type energy and that? And I think like, so when I was reading it, because sometimes I read things and I'm just like, something happened there, because this article just seems like.
But he discussed this though. He discussed this on a panel where he said that he went to Forbes and showed them that he was worth 890 million pounds, and they refused to call him a billionaire. And so he said, this is a part of the slave mentality that tries to keep me small. And so when I'm ready, I will show them again. And so he came back with his receipts that proved that he was officially a billionaire.
Plot twist though, the guy who wrote the article wrote Jay-Z's biography, by the way.
There you go. Is it that brother?
They've met a few
What's
times.
his name?
As well,
Ernest.
No, Zach O'Malley. I've got a book that he wrote in my room. So he wrote Jay-Z's biography. So that's a bit of a plot twist.
That is
there you go.
But I mean, the whole article prefaced on kind of, we don't really believe you, but we're going to do a bunch of calculations to make you get there. And then each calculation was being slightly discredited when they got to the number. A good example was like, oh, your company's worth this, and normally we do this. Like, when have they ever explained that to us? We just normally see a number and that's it, right? And I think they emphasized the fact that he reached out to them to justify the valuation. that's not uncommon from what I've read about other people on that list. It's not an uncommon thing to do. Because for these guys, right, these guys are very competitive. This is a yardstick. Your net worth is ultimately a yardstick that they can use to benchmark themselves against other successful people in their field or otherwise. So, I mean, you could call it a bit egotistical, but it's not that bizarre to want that number to be as high as possible so you look good amongst your peers. But yeah, I mean, I agree with both of you guys. The tone was a bit condescending. I was actually happy when I saw the headline because of how many people wrote him off. But then when I read the article, it left a bad taste in my mouth in terms of how happy I can be, because it sounded like it was being forced, when in reality he's still done a fantastic job, right? Selling I think $1.5 billion worth of Yeezys in 1 year so quickly is an amazing achievement, and that's what they should have focused on, right?
Yeah.
So there's something where it's like, and this kind of goes back to the timing of it, where it's like making money, announcing money in COVID. So on LinkedIn, a couple of posts were being shared around people being inboxed by, different organizations trying to sell stuff. And they're like, look, there's a crisis going on. No one wants to buy your SaaS platform or your software or whatever it is that you do. We're concerned about the NHS right now. And then one guy kind of gave a really good counter where he was like, look, this is my livelihood. I want to preserve the jobs of my staff. The support that's available to us right now won't protect my business or help my staff enough. So I'm going to carry this on. And this is still important for people. So measuring social media conversations or whatever it was at this time is still an important thing to be doing. It's actually more important now than it was before. So I'm going to keep pushing. This isn't just about a money grab. And it kind of maybe create a human element to it. So for those who are struggling, even if you're struggling on a £10 million scale, you might have a 10 million business that might fold, versus like, I need to make money day to day. There was another post by a guy, I think it was Mr. Exposed, I want to say, somebody who's working in delivery. He's delivering parcels at this time. And he's like, look, I own a bar or an events company and there's no events right now. So I'm not going to sit here on my own to do nothing. I'm going to go and do that. So what's your overall thoughts from the top end scale of large businesses still trying to sell, and then more of the smaller business scale, which is like, I've got to do whatever it takes, and people critiquing them for delivering parcels in this time?
Personally, like as a business owner, like this is about survival. We this is our livelihood at the end of the day. And I hear that in terms of it's not about gloating in any way, and I don't like endorse any kind of gloating or I'm doing this and this is how much money I made. I don't think that's the right attitude to have again. But I think when it comes to, as you mentioned before about that person saying that I'm doing this in order to make sure that my staff are good, or I'm doing this in order to make sure my family are good. I think that when you've got your intentions set in that way, then you've got to do what you've got to do, and you've got to pivot, you've got to adapt. This is an uncertain time. Like even myself, I'm still looking at how can I engage schools? How can, schools are shut. I'm still looking for opportunities. I'm still saying, look, your schools are still schools. In a couple of weeks, schools, we hope in a few weeks' time, they're going to be back. So I need to still be part of that conversation. I can't just sit down and say, okay, COVID's here. So yeah, it's mad. I'm going to wait for everyone to come back out. And then there's a floodgate of people trying to approach schools. I've still got to be in that conversation. So I just feel like, again, it depends on the intention that people are doing things with. That are doing things, but essentially it's all about survival, whichever way you look at it. It's all about trying to survive this wave because it's unprecedented for our time.
Tommy, what's your thoughts?
I mean, it's a tough one, and this might come across wrong, but I do think people have to remember that life will go on after all of this is finished, and hopefully it's going to be finished sooner rather than later. And as much as right now the primary focus is obviously healthcare, but as soon as we come out of that and we're equipped, the focus is going to shift to the economy, because that does impact healthcare and mental health and all of that side of things. So if we completely just shut everything down, I don't want to say it's short-sighted, again, that sounds a bit harsh, but to some extent it is, because there will be life after this. And I mean, yeah, as a business owner, I can only imagine, particularly if you don't get access to a lot of the grants that the government are giving out. You should be able to empathize with people basically who are sending you those messages, because they're probably, if someone's rolling in cash and can chill at home all day, they're not going to be sitting there sending you DMs on LinkedIn. They're doing that because they need to do it in order to get their livelihood, right, or to pay their staff's wages. So I mean, I can definitely empathize with it, and I think people need to realize things will go on after this. Obviously, hoping we're dealing with it and saving as many lives as possible, but we shouldn't ignore the fact that people have businesses to maintain, salaries to pay, children to feed, all of those sorts of things that they need to think about.
Darwood, do you have a view?
Yeah, you know what? Like, you can't knock the hustle. That's always my view. Like, you can't knock the hustle. Like, if you don't want someone knocking on your door and disturbing you, then whatever. But like, to have an issue with it, like, that makes no sense. And that, like, if everyone's trying to hustle through this and trying to survive, even if some people are just being greedy and trying to grab things and whatnot, like, I can't knock the hustle. If you're not doing anything deemed illegal, like, go for it. Like, to be honest, we're in a shutdown period where there's nothing else to do. So if you want to hustle, If you want to paint. If you want to be still, be still. If you want to, like, do whatever, like, this is the time to do it. And that, like, I don't get anyone moaning about it. It makes no sense.
What I find really interesting is I think this is probably a part of the disconnect of understanding business in general, but also the kind of like anti-business, anti-multimillionaire, billionaire approach that we've taken in the last few years is that there's someone who owns their own business whose turnover could be, let's say it's like $1.5 million, but you have 14 staff members and 80% of that goes straight back out through expenditure or just liabilities in general. And that person might take home on themselves 100K. So that person's on 100K. There are many people who are on 100K in PAYE jobs, but there's something negative about that person's 100K versus somebody else's 100K who worked for somebody. It's almost as if like the sympathy isn't there. The warmth of like you're going to lose your whole business and 14 people might be out of work. There's not that like, man, do what you have to do, man. But then I think if somebody was earning 100K and lost their job, there would be a lot more sympathy for losing your job than they would be for losing your business. Does that ring true to you? And what do you think that is?
I think it's I think, unfortunately, because we're born into a system that has been running for centuries and whatnot, like, we start to have more trust in the system than we do in entrepreneurship. So if we can't see someone's being like a mega successful entrepreneur, we probably don't have the same sympathy for them. Like, even the Richard Branson asking people, the government, to bail him out, the first thing everyone was on is like, oh, you live on an island and you ain't been paying tax. But I'm just like, yeah, but if he loses his business and it struggles, do you know how many people go on the unemployment line? And that, so shut up. Like, let him try and find a way to get his business. But we don't have sympathy for that guy. You are absolutely right. And it makes no sense. But I think it's almost Stockholm syndrome for the system. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. I get what you're trying to say.
Tommy,
have you got a view or Amani?
I think, when you look at the system, like, I think part of maybe the dislike of entrepreneurs, based on some of the things you just said, Darwood, is knowing how to maneuver the system. So, for example, something like this happening and entrepreneurs, like, at a particular level, knowing that they can go to the government. And so maybe there's a level of distaste in people's mouth because they're like, okay, hang on, you're going to get a bailout or whatever the case may be. But essentially, as you said, it's a hustle. We, as entrepreneurs, we take a risk to provide services and to do what we're doing every single day. We kind of move away from that level of security that a 9 to 5 or, a structured job will give somebody. And as you said before, we can't really, I'm not here for other people to like me necessarily. I'm here to make sure that I survive, my family survives, that the legacy passed on. If people like me in the process, that's what it is. But I'm not here to necessarily be a friend to everybody. And so I think that there's some entrepreneurs that will operate very, very ruthlessly. And there's some people that will say, do you know what? I'm here, I'm doing my thing, I'm a nice person, but I can't make you like me. So I'm out here, I'm going to grind, I'm going to knock on your door, I'm going to be annoying. I remember I used to make phone calls to landlords every single day when I started my property business. And I used to hit F off, get off my phone, but I'm still going to call you tomorrow, fam. I'm still going to call you because I need to eat, bro. Like, you know, and you said no agents, but I will call myself a tenant introducer just to get you to stay on the phone for 5 minutes extra to find out what that is. And people could say that's slimy, but if I don't do that, I don't eat. So how can you knock it? Do you get what I'm saying? So would you say it's money at all costs for you? And where's the line then being drawn? Because I hear you, but I suppose just for clarification I think it's impact. It's definitely, for me personally, it's impact at the forefront. You know, I'm a social entrepreneur, so the social comes first. I'm really into making sure that there's a legacy, that there's an impact with the people that we're dealing with. Yes, of course, I want to make money. Yes, of course, I'd love to be a billionaire. Like, even this conversation, some of the things that have been said, I'm like, okay, cool. I need to know that for when I try and get to those echelons. But I guess, like, even having that aspiration, like, I'm taking crazy risks right now to be here. Like, you know, there's many things I've done over the years that it could have been easier for me just to go down the other road and just to, you know, plain sail it and give my skills to someone else. But I've preferred to take this road because I think that the payoff and the ideas I've got on my head are going to be more valuable than giving it to someone else's organization. So it's not about peas. Like, it is about money, but it's not. That's not like top of my list. I'd say that's second or third. There's other things that are, you know, priorities for me.
So go on, Tommy.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I think, to come back to the question about is there like a disdain towards entrepreneurs? I think that it's, in a lot of people, human nature, that if someone does something which you decided you're not going to do, them failing validates your decision making.
Yeah, for real.
And I think that's what happens. So I've decided there's like either or, right? Or there's the entrepreneurs and the freelancers and the self-employed, and this is even more prevalent today. And then there's the people in full-time employment. And the people, if your friend who's self-employed, who you told not to do it, flops, that validates you staying in a job. And it works the other way as well, right? Like, if you're an entrepreneur and you've been telling your friend to leave their job and start a business, and then their job starts to go badly, that starts to validate your decision making. And I think that's human nature. Sometimes you have to slap yourself out of it, in a lot of instances. In terms of the broader dislike towards entrepreneurs, the Richard Branson case is really interesting. And I actually exclude COVID from this. So I think COVID is an exogenous thing, like, it's external. No one could have predicted it. It just came out of nowhere. You could have been running your business perfect, and this came and it screwed you over. I think, however, historically, and the financial crisis is probably the best example of this, is a lot of successful entrepreneurs, rich people, billionaires, coming on to the conversations we had earlier today, they get a huge amount of the upside when things go well. They get all of the upside. And then when things go bad, all of the losses are socialized, and everyone else has to pay more tax to bail them out. And that's asymmetric, and that's fundamentally what's wrong with capitalism over the last sort of 15, 20 years versus the capitalism that existed in like the 60s and 70s, where there was the whole American dream, and if you worked hard, you got it back. It's like now there's a small group of people who see all the upside, and then we all see the downside. And it's not fair. I read a quote earlier today, which was, if you're playing a game where if they flip a coin, it's heads they win, tails you lose. So I thought, yeah, when you mentioned the podcast today, I thought it was an interesting quote because it makes so much sense in light of why there's a lot of this pent-up frustration. But having said all of that, COVID is a bit of a unique case because it's not really anyone's fault. I mean, I'm sure it's someone's fault, but it's not caused by a billionaire or caused by greedy bankers selling dodgy assets or anything like that.
Powerful. Guys, so just very quickly, if you can go to each one, if you can just tell everyone where we can find you and end on the final note, should we have billionaires and if black billionaires are important, then they make it very, very clear for all of us. But thank you guys so much for joining. It's been amazing, and we need to do this again. This is the right mix of people to have these types of conversations with. I'll let Tommy start. Where can we find you online, and just a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter. My handle is TommyASC91. In terms of background, I studied economics at university, started working in investment banking for a couple of years, left that to start a couple of e-commerce businesses, So now work in e-commerce as well as writing for Forbes as a contributor, which is a side hustle where I feature Black people doing amazing stuff like Marvyn to hopefully shine the light on people in the community. In terms of, do I think there should be billionaires? Yes, but it's something that we just have to monitor the level of power they get. So a certain sector of society aren't playing a different game from everyone else. And I definitely think it's important for the Black community to provide inspiration for people, that there is an unlimited upside that we can reach for.
Powerful. Darwood?
That's a great answer.
Yeah, definitely. Darwood Grace is Black Jesus on all platforms, and that. I believe, as long as this system's in place, we need more Black billionaires, like as many as possible, and that till it's not even a thing no more. And but just it makes no sense that for the amount of resources that Africa has, that we haven't got that many billionaires. That makes no sense. Like throughout the whole diaspora. So yeah. And what was the second part to the question, Marv?
Just Black billionaires. There's billionaires and then Black billionaires.
Yeah. Do we need more billionaires on the planet? Well, as long as they're Black.
Cool. Let's try and get 2% by the next 10 years. Amani?
Yes, so Amani Simpson, social entrepreneur. I produced a short film about my life called Amani, starring Van Wade. It's been viewed 2.6 million times now on YouTube. It's used up and down the country as a tool for change. I'm trying to be in that billionaire club. Some of the projects that I'm working on now are global projects. They have to be in order to bring the impact that I want to, leave that legacy. When I got stabbed 7 times when I was 21, I made a decision that if I got another chance, I was going to leave a legacy, and that's what I'm here to do. So you can follow me on Instagram, amani.simpson. My company, my social enterprise is called Aviard. So that's Aviard. If you Google that or Google my name, you'll see a lot of different things that I'm dealing with. And I look forward to connecting. And firstly, I want to say to you guys as my big brothers, thank you for bringing me on the platform and for always just giving me your ear and sharpening my iron. Do you get what I'm saying? Like I sit here and I'm like, okay, I may not understand everything that's been said at the time, but I'm downloading and I'll go and research, and then that helps me to then provide it to those that are coming after me. So thank you. And finally, about more Black billionaires or more billionaires in general, I go back to the point I said before. I think if you're going to be a billionaire and you're going to be Black, you have to understand the responsibility that comes with that, like it or hate it. I think there's a level of inspiration that is provided to the young people and the rest of your community. So you have to be responsible. You have to understand that you've got to be passing back wisdom. You've got to be representing us properly in these rooms. You can't be out here doing wild stuff, not because I'm saying that you shouldn't do that, but it's just because it's going to unfortunately have maybe possibly an adverse effect on the rest of us. So just as it starts to, there will be a lot more Black billionaires, I think, in the next 10 years, 100%. So I would just like to see them, make some smart choices, basically.
Amazing. That's so dope. Thank you guys so much.
Marv,
really
what
appreciate
about yours?
My
Real quick.
Where to find me? My name is Marvyn Harrison. Please find me at Dope Black Dads or Marvyn_Harrison.
And do you think there should be Black billionaires?
No, absolutely. I think until we come up with a alternative Black business model, then I think we should definitely be coming up and being at the table in terms of billionaires. I'm more inclined in the overarching sense to look for a new way of living. I don't really think capitalism works spiritually for people. So, but that's a whole nother conversation that I won't go into.
Absolutely right.
Yeah, I just don't think that's I don't think there's success in that. So I think my goal would be that until we have something formulated, that we do a money grab and a land grab, protect the wealth of Africa and the Caribbean, and also our own IP that we generate and our own ideas and experiences in this country, in the US, and make sure we're being monetized as much as humanly possible, and then build from there. And I think we're getting there more than not, but I'm not sure if you can take the whole, I'm doing air quotes, black community with you, on your leap. And I think you've got to get somewhere and then introduce the people who are passionate and open to your perspective into the way of working, and then build that army that way. That's pretty much what we do with Dope Black anyway. So
Word.
cool. Guys, thank you so much. It's been amazing. I really appreciate it. I'm going to actually just put another date in the diary so we can just hang out again. We're all in lockdown. We ain't got nowhere to go, so we might as well talk to each other.
Check my diary still. It's a bit mad.
For anybody else, if they want to get in touch, feel free to get in touch. hello@dopeblackdads.com. We're also at Dope Black Dads on all social media platforms. My name has been Marvyn Harrison. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to rate, subscribe to your podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. And we'll be back again next week.